You know what's difficult? Choosing between the PS1 and Dreamcast. Sony's first console has so many classic games that make it a blast to play with even today, and Sega's last is way ahead of its time and boasts its own library of hidden gems, some of which still can't be played on anything newer. There's got to be a way to get the best of both worlds, right? Wait, maybe there is. In 1999, the Bleem company released the first emulator for Sony PlayStation to PCs called, well, Bleem. Yeah, they weren't the most imaginative lot. Now imagine how big this was. Imagine if someone tomorrow made a disc that lets you play Xbox One games on PS4. That's what we're talking about here. Even if it wasn't a perfect one-to-one recreation of the game every time, it's incredibly impressive that such a thing was even possible. Around 2001, the Bleem company released a few discs porting their PC emulator, whose compatibility wasn't the best to say the least, over to the Sega Dreamcast, and surprisingly, they were fairly good. The fact that you could play PlayStation games almost perfectly on a Dreamcast was bound to turn some heads, and most notably Sony's. Sony took Bleem to court for unfair competition, but oddly enough, Bleem won every single count on that case. Unfortunately though, the story goes that Bleem ended up having to cease operations anyway due to the immense legal fees they were facing wrecking their cash flow. What a shame, I would have loved to see what else Bleem had in the pipeline. In the end, there were only ever 3 Bleem for Dreamcast boot discs released officially, allowing play for Metal Gear Solid, Tekken 3, and Gran Turismo 2. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of GT, so let's focus on the Metal Gear and Tekken 3 discs for this video. When you stick the Bleemcast disc into your console, you get a pretty snarky legal info screen, followed by another one telling you to pop your copy of whatever game you want to play into the drive and press start. After that, away you go. No messing around here, and I guess we shouldn't mess around either, so let's jump in. Looking at MGS on here really shows off both the perks and flaws of Bleemcast. The graphics are upscaled to double their original resolution, i.e. 320 by 240 to 640 by 480, and have had full-screen anti-aliasing applied to them. While this means there are less jagged, pixelated edges on object, it does show just how basic and blocky the models really are. Not to mention, Bleemcast automatically applies bilinear texture filtering to everything, so sometimes textures appear rather muddy, especially in a dark game like this. Characters' faces, for example, just look smudgy and gross, while snow looks okay. I mean, it's really a mixed bag. Another thing to bear in mind is that everything in-game still refers to the buttons as they would appear on a PlayStation controller, so you can easily get confused. You see, the controls are slightly altered from the PS1 version due to a lack of buttons on the Dreamcast controller, but the long and short of it is that left and right on the D-pad work how L1 and R1 would on the PS1, and down on the D-pad opens the codec instead of select. It's difficult to push in the wrong direction, so for me this was never really a big issue. Well, not as big of an issue as the fact that I generally suck at MGS1. And if you're like me and suck at MGS1, you're going to want to save a lot, but the problem is that Bleemcast requires an entire VMU in order to save games, so you really might want to consider getting an extra memory card for playing PS1 games on Dreamcast. However, aside from those minor nitpicks, this is definitely Metal Gear Solid as it appears on the PS1. The game runs full speed, everything sounds correct, and it's totally playable from beginning to end. It gets the thumbs up from me overall, but I would definitely prefer to play MGS1 on the PlayStation. Tekken 3's graphics have the same process applied to them as Metal Gear Solid's did, but due to the fact that Tekken 3 is a more vibrant and colourful game in the first place, the result is much more appealing. In fact, certain things such as characters' faces are much better looking and more visible on the Dreamcast than they ever were on the PS1. Not to mention the frame rate is phenomenal, although I've heard that certain special moves would cause the game to lag slightly. It was never a problem for me though. The buttons also seem vaguely unresponsive, but I'm not sure how much of that is Bleemcast's doing, and how much of that is just the fact that Tekken 3 is a very slow fighter by modern standards anyway. Aside from that, once again, this is definitely Tekken 3, and everything available in that game is available in this. Music plays correctly, every character has every move, all the effects look right. It's a good time. Now you may think that's the end of the line when it comes to Bleem for Dreamcast, but you would be wrong. You see, many years later, a beta boot disc that would play any game was leaked online. I happen to have burnt it, and I happen to have a load of PS1 games, so let's check out how things go. I'll start with Tekken 2 because, Tekken 3 went well, they can't be that far apart.
Round 1. Fight! You win!
Tekken 2. Just as I remember it. Okay, whatever, so Tekken 2 was a bust. How about we try something less, nightmare-inducing? Crash Bandicoot 2, ladies and gentlemen. So weirdly enough, this one's missing all of the sound effects, but the music plays just fine. If a little bit hollow sounding. Not only that, but certain textures refuse to load or only load once you get close enough to them. Plus, Crash's animations seem to be a lot choppier than on the PS1. Aside from that, everything runs at full speed, the game's totally playable if you're desperate for Crash 2 and have no other way of playing it, I suppose. How about Tombi? Well, aside from the corrupted text, the black sky, and the utter sacrilege that occurs with the pixel art in this game, this works surprisingly well up until the Furious Tornado. But at that point, the game stops working and just starts playing audio from the FMVs without any visuals. Bummer. Yeah, again, I can't really say this is working well. Well, how about Bubsy 3D? Everyone's favourite, especially mine. I'm not plugging my own video at all, what are you talking about? Oh, I'm sorry, did I say Bubsy 3D? I meant Bubsy's face is a gateway to hell and everything is a torturous landscape of death. Yeah, let's not do this. Tenchu Stealth Assassins. Works really well, actually. In fact, a majority of the time it runs at double the speed of the PS1 version. Sometimes there's a little slowdown and some minor texture problems, and you do have to set the game to use the Alt-3 control scheme for it to actually be playable and for you to select your items. But aside from this, Tenchu 1 is actually extremely playable on the Dreamcast, and everything looks okay, I suppose. And finally, Parappa the Rapper. It begins promising with the same problems as Tenchu for the most part. The non-rhythm parts of the gameplay all run at double the speed of the original, and that sometimes means that characters finish their animations before they're meant to and just sit there. Plus the indicator as to when you're supposed to press the buttons is sort of off. But it doesn't matter, I know from instinct when to press those buttons. But it does become problematic around stage 2, not to mention that some of the graphic glitches after that come along. It's definitely playable, but like MGS, I would rather play it on an actual PS1, and I don't think that this is a good substitute at all. And to be honest, I think that can be said in general about Bleem for the Dreamcast. Tekken 3 is the only game I came across that actually ran objectively better on Dreamcast than on the PS1, and MGS1 runs about as well. That's the best you get otherwise. Parappa and Tenchu ran too fast, and all the other games mentioned in this video ran with significant issues to the point that Bleemcast just can't be used as a PS1 replacement. In fact, there's a lot of games I simply didn't put into the video that I tested because they would crash before you could actually play the game. So what's my overall verdict for Bleem on the Dreamcast? If you have a Dreamcast and a PS1, then the retail discs of Metal Gear Solid, Tekken 3 and Gran Turismo are definitely worth a go, just to see how your favourite games run with a few neat little hardware boosts. But the beta boot disc simply doesn't provide the performance for anywhere near enough games for it to be a worthwhile solution. If at the time this came out I were to sell my PS1 in hopes that I would be able to play my entire library of PS1 games on the Dreamcast, I would be very disappointed.